Remember Byron. Remember Byron. Remember Byron. Remember Byron. There was a hole in your mind.
Did I say wrong show? I meant to say wrong show.
So I was walking up to Richard one day, and I looked into the eye, and I said, not the one. Not the one. You know, ever since we won,
quote.
I've been really confused. You know, ever since we lost the Earth-Minbari War, I think that fighting the shadows should really help us to defeat the bad guys at Sahadum. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is set up a station where humans and aliens can come together in peace and be wrapped in several tons of metal.
All alone in the night.
All alone in the night. You know, I heard somebody tried that. And that it was their last best hope for peace.
Yeah.
But that it failed. It totally failed.
Well, what happens then?
Well, then they had a year of fire and a year of destruction. A year they took back what was there. It was also a year of rebirth, a year of great sadness, a year of pain,
a year of joy.
It was a new age.
It was a new age.
I'm gonna keep pressing the throttle on this thing. And then, you know, what was great about this station is that it had a beginning and a middle and an end, which Richard has still never seen because he got tired of Garibaldi.
I saw the very end.
Being alcoholic. He just skipped all of Garibaldi's alcoholism.
What was it about
Gary
Doyle's
I'll admit it now in front of our audience. I did not watch all of Babylon 5 season 5. I started watching it, and then I was like, I just skipped to the end.
It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal.
Yeah, I know. But those first 4 seasons were truly incredible.
Well, I mean, seasons 2 through 4 were undoubtedly. This time is the first time I've ever cherry-picked the episodes that I'm watching. Like, I went, some guy, Rowan J. Coleman, who I really love and appreciate, he released a series of videos talking about Babylon 5, Legend of the Rangers, all these others. And, you know, I really appreciated these videos so much that I was like, man, I really want to go back and watch B5. And so I actually, for the very first time in watching any series, I looked up, like, what are the best ofs and what are the absolutely necessary episodes. And I straight up skipped all of season 1. I was just like, you know what, whatever. I don't know.
There's good stuff in season 1, man.
There is good stuff. And this is what I did with Battlestar Galactica, actually, this year, too. I started at the end of season 2, and I continued through season 3 and season 4, and then I went back to the beginning and I started again at season 1. And I tried to get Hero to watch it with me, but I was more consumed with it than she was. And so anyway, I think I'll go back to the first season. I think I'll probably skip Lost Tales and Third Space and the Legend of the Rangers. Maybe I'll watch Legend of the Rangers. I don't know. Anyway, I really love Babylon 5. Like, it's really entertaining. It's really engaging. It's really fun and beautiful and elegant and was creative and clever for its time. I like Lonzo. I like Jakar. I like Veer. I like Sheridan. Oh, my God. What an epic and amazing character. Yeah.
Characters all have these great arcs. And what I like the most in Babylon 5 is just this growing sense of mystery about the shadows. And you know the Shadow War is coming. But they just build up the shadows with more and more creepy little details, like the fact that their ships are controlled by, like, people who are psychically trapped inside the machine. It is like this drip, drip, drip of scary and vague details about them, and it's a great build-up.
Yeah.
The fact that there are prophecies that come true, like the Great Hand, Molari, and the Great Hand reaching out from the sun.
Yeah, I I found that well, what's funny is there was recently an episode where I watched the one where the shadows are landing on Centauri Prime, and what's funny is he's been wearing this new jacket that's not purple.
Yeah, he changes into the old jacket.
Yeah, he loses his new jacket, and I noticed that in order that he be wearing the same jacket that he was in the Prophecy. So, which was an interesting little oversight. Now, I mean, yeah, there was a lot missing in season 5, so I understand skipping it, but definitely someday I highly recommend going back.
It's on my list. It's on my list.
Especially Sleeping in Light. Yeah.
I've also had a lot of thinking around The Expanse. Like I hear it's really good, and I've watched a lot of videos about it, and
the most recent book just came out. I've been listening to it, but yeah, it's pretty good.
So yeah, all of this said, for our listeners, today we're talking about future tense.
That's right.
And possibly we should just restart. Okay, so welcome to Clever Orbits. My name is Louis Brandmeier. I've got with me Tyler and Richard, and we're talking about future tense. I like to think it's the conclusion and crescendo of the temporal Cold War storyline that we should have had in Enterprise. It would have been nice to have just, well, maybe not. I mean, Stormfront was okay. The Xindi thing was okay. But this should have been, if they had left it here, it would have been enough. It would have been a vague enough sense of foreboding and dread and terror for us to feel like, wow, there's something really horrific going on behind the scenes.
There's something Babylon 5
like about it. Yeah. Well, and of course they would have had to pick up the thread if they wanted to fulfill that comparison, and they would have had to handle it well, which they didn't. They had you fight evil alien Nazis, and that was kind of their way of trying to wrap it up, and then a single scene where Daniel says, "Look, Jonathan, the timeline is resetting itself." And it was like, but no, it can't be that easy. No.
Branch realities.
Of course. So this is back in the heyday when we were full of hope and buoyancy about the temporal Cold War. This is back when it was just this creepy thing that was crawling up your neck with its little tendrils, its Cthulhu-like tendrils, and you were like, well, shit, this thing behind me, I wonder what it is and what's going on with it.
Or this thing in front of you.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a good episode. It was a nice shoot 'em up, and it was nice in building a sense of dread. I didn't find a moment of compassion, strangely enough. I didn't find a salient philosophical theme. So this may be the death of that hermeneutic if this continues going that way. I don't want it to be, because it's our unique way of viewing these things. It's through those two angles.
I felt some compassion for T'Pol, and the fact that she is really committed to there is no time travel and Vulcans are never going to swap chromosomes with humans. And that's really being challenged for her in a big way, and it sort of seems like underneath she's boiling with doubt, but she has to present a unified exterior in order to be the Vulcan persona.
Yeah, there was some subtlety to her portrayal here, and you're right.
But like everyone else, like this is a pretty scary discovery, this thing from the future, and I like that the ship from the future looks old. Like it looks like an ancient artifact, but it's from the future, and it just completely destroys everything they ever thought, even about space-time geometry.
Yeah. And then of course you get the creepy reveal of the dead guy in the beginning. It's like a horror film.
Yeah, that guy's very scary. I would feel compassion for him, but we didn't really get much character development for him.
Yeah, as far as corpses go.
There's a lot to talk about with this guy himself, actually. So, number one, why the fuck was he out there? Number two, like, okay, so number one, why was he alone in a pod out in space? Number two, why was he time traveling? Number three, when did he die? How did he die? What happened to throw him back in time from the 31st century? Was he hanging out in the 22nd century and planning to go back to the future, but like he died? He just died on the way there? Was the biomatter, was that horrific looking blue biomatter that powered the ship, were those his entrails? Was he on a mission to try to save some information or something? And the only way that he could succeed was by keeping the ship intact? I mean, there's a fan fiction behind this guy, and no one has written it, so I feel like we should.
Maybe he went back to, like, the 19th century and then died, and he's just been tumbling through space.
And time. Tumbling through space and time, because, like, his time drive is messed up, too, or something.
It looks like that's been around for a long time.
So there's a lot of options here. I favor a very specific one. So I went with the humorous angles for a second, or the hilarious angles for a second, which is extra humorous, because they're fun. But the question that arose for me was, how is it that Enterprise is the ship to find this pod? And I was like, that strikes me as, given the whole space, the whole of space, the whole of the universe that this guy's ship could have ended up in. Of course, he's still associated with the Federation in the 31st century, or the Vidraish, or whatever we want to call them. So it makes sense that he's in basically the Alpha Quadrant. But, like, why did he end up at this time? And I started to think, well, it seems like a test. It seems like a test of the Enterprise crew to see if they would do the proper thing with it, which is namely protect it from the other factions. Or maybe he knew that he didn't have any allies in this century, so his last act was to flee to these spatial and temporal coordinates in order to ensure that someone who was already touched by somebody from the temporal Cold War, namely Daniels, and in Shockwave as well. Shockwave was the height of the temporal Cold War. At least part one was the best ever, and that gave me a lot of hope for the franchise. Like, oh man, they are endangering literally everything that we've seen on screen in Star Trek with what Daniels just did by removing Archer to the future. So, like, anyway, I feel though that Daniels had basically established Archer's trustworthiness. I don't know. So like, here's the thing though, the problems with my theory, which I explored. If it was a test, then they had to use either someone's corpse with or without permission, and then the question for the Enterprise crew is like, well, why haven't they retrieved this? And why did they retrieve it from those particular temporal coordinates? And, like, I guess obviously it's because Enterprise got the transmitter working, or Trip got the transmitter working, which kind of boggles my mind that he'd be able to make 31st century tech work. But whatever.
Make an interface.
He's got an interface, okay. And so anyway, what do you guys think was going on with this guy? What's the answer?
I don't think he's a test. I got to think for a second.
And another question is, like, what counts as a human male if T'Pol registered him as one? I guess our scanners are just not that sensitive. Like, they had to do deeper investigation.
Like 75% human.
It's like enough human.
Did she just look at it? I feel like she just looked at him.
Okay, so look, they say this ship is leaking temporal radiation. Presumably you're not supposed to be leaking temporal radiation, so maybe there was an accident.
A horrible accident.
And we saw that, like, there's in that core room, stuff was missing. Maybe there was some kind of a containment failure, some kind of temporal meltdown that flung him way back in time to a place where there was no resources available for him, and he was too far away from whatever, and his thrusters didn't work, and so he just died.
Do you think he had a family?
Now, what does a family mean in the 31st century?
Do you think he had friends?
I hope so.
Do you think he had dreams? Maybe.
No dreams.
This poor guy.
He was trying to visit a time and place in history where he could get his favorite meal, and he overshot it and started eating parts of the ship.
And that was the only way he could survive. So that was another thing that occurred to me. You guys remember the biomatter drive from the USS Equinox late on at Voyager, where they would kill those creatures and burn them for fuel? Mm-hmm. Okay, well apparently Richard has.
I do. It was awesome.
That was a good episode.
Yeah, it was one of the best. So anyway, I think if they're using biomatter in the ship, maybe the Federation really has gone bad somehow, like in a way that we'll see in Discovery, to where they're just totally fine using the decayed flesh of dead animals from other species to power their ships, and maybe these are some of the dark secrets that Daniels hides from our view.
I would hope they'd be able to grow things like that at that point.
Oh, maybe they just grow biomatter.
Yeah, I mean, at that point you can probably, or even if it's an animal, you could genetically engineer it to be brain dead, so it doesn't feel pain.
Yeah, because that's ethical.
My inner vegan is confused. He's a little bit confused and disoriented and terrified.
It's never conscious. It's like a big plant.
Yeah, you're right. So there were a lot of things that I really loved about this episode and then noticed. Not the least of which was, okay, so we'll talk about the title and then some of the great quotes. The title, so the future from our view is tense. Enterprise is in our future, as speaking to the viewers. And this is a tense future, so there's a kind of trite title to the episode. And then the future from their view is even more tense. So and then there's this whole questioning about the nature of the future tense. Is this time travel or you
gotta relax.
So what did you take as a linguist? What as a linguist? What
Linguini.
Did you see in the title? What was interesting to you? What could be going on with this reference to future tense specifically, other than tension?
Well, I was hoping that the follow-up episode would be called Pluperfect Tense or Future Perfect Subjunctive Mood, but I guess they dropped it. It really should be future perfect, though, because that's things that will be completed in the future, and that guy's life sure is completed.
Yeah, the future tense is kind of ambiguous, isn't it? Yeah. Well, so the Suliban transporter effect is pretty satisfying. Not sure if you guys saw that. Pretty satisfying. This spatial fold technology is common for 31st century people. You'll see in Daniels' quarters in Shockwave, Reed reaches in and grabs something from within a closet that is deeper when he's reaching in than it actually is from the view.
Yeah. I mean, folding space, folding time, those are related concepts.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
We got to talk about Daniel's room.
We will.
When they go in there, they don't turn on the lights. Why don't they turn on the lights? And here's another thing I noticed. I noticed that when they went in there, they left the door open. So some random crewman could have been walked in there and been like, "Hey guys, what's going on?"
Well,
and
so Richard
totally polluted the timeline.
Richard, their only light source was the light coming in from outside.
Well, I mean, They don't have flashlights?
Right.
They
Why
couldn't
is that?
turn on the lights because the light, there may have been light-activated Daniel's technology in that room, and there was a conversation behind the scenes about leaving the lights as much off as possible. Yeah, sure.
The smart
like
answer
the height of bullshit for me, by the way.
is that
I don't think I could have gotten any worse.
They couldn't really feature the hologram showing all of the information from the database they were purveying. If there had been a light on, it would have diluted the effect.
Did you guys notice that holographic database, it like repeated a little too quickly? Like I noticed we were seeing like the same like 3 or 4 ships, and it kept cycling through, and then Archer kept acting like he was looking at more different ships. But it was
runs
the same
on Windows
like 3
XP.
or 4 ships. It was like the same graphic repeated at too short a time interval. And maybe that was the screensaver for the thing, was to show you the 3 most common ships while you're searching for the actual ship that you're looking for.
Why?
I guess. So that was a little dissatisfying to me.
The easy answer is they're all incompetent.
So we now also know the code for Daniels' quarters, by the way. You could clearly see it. Well, it's that series of buttons that we saw Archer push.
Yeah, did you note it down?
No, we don't. We don't need to know the numbers.
Numbers are hieroglyphs.
We know which buttons to push and in what order, because we can see him pushing the buttons. So, anyway, it's not that important. I mean, somebody somewhere will want that.
Some crewman's going to be like, oh, that door's always been locked, but now it's open. I'm going to go in there and check it out.
And then he gets brutally killed.
And then
he walks
the timeline is fucked.
And both Archer and T'Pol shoot him.
That's it. What happens is that guy gets flung into the 30th century, and then he has a lot of sex with a lot of aliens. And his children, following in his footsteps, have a lot of sex with a lot of aliens over a really short span of time. And every 20 years, they add a new, and then it's the last survivor of this bloodline is the guy in the time pod. And this guy in the time pod is trying to go and save his father and prevent this horrible, horrible series of unfortunate events that result in his birth.
There's the
maybe that's cover. Why there don't seem to be lights in the ship either.
Yeah, who needs lights?
Because he's embracing the fullness of his own shame. He's such a bastard child. Everyone had sex with my grandparents.
And my
parents and my parents' parents. All right, so that was the most dissatisfying and unlikely fan fiction explanation for this guy that we will ever uncover.
What if it's Zefram Cochrane?
It's not Zefram Cochrane. We know that from another episode.
Can't be Zefram Cochrane.
There's an original series episode which talks about
the wrong shape.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, like, I guess if Zefram Cochrane goes back in time, well, no, that wouldn't make sense. After he leaves that planet or something. Okay.
Some kind of Star Trek.
Oh, I did actually find the slightest bit of interesting philosophy in this. We'll get back to it in a second, though. But it felt like a decent shoot 'em up. The like second half of the episode was like decent action. So I'll finish my, I guess, opening salvo-ish, because I don't really have one here, with my favorite quote from Phlox. I love that he's always so happy and cheerful, and he says, "That corpse is full of surprises."
Yeah, it's a good line.
It's a top 3 for me this season.
My favorite.
Good thing to just bring out of context. Like when you meet someone, or you haven't seen someone for a while, you say, "Hey,
how's it going?
That corpse is full of surprises."
And you wonder, what did he do?
That's a great one. And then you say, "Oh, wait, sorry, no, it wasn't you I was talking with about that."
And you show your Bluetooth device.
So Does anybody have any idea what that wall of switches and lights behind Reed is in the launch bay?
It's the readout display.
What's that?
It's the interface readout display.
Readout display. Oh, that's cute. It's a readout display.
Yeah, good. Well,
is that intentional?
I'm going to go
Chip's
shoot
the one that was going to be
myself now.
out eventually, right?
I'm just kidding. I do like that they call it launch bay rather than shuttle bay. I think that's really cool for some reason.
Because they're launching shuttles. They're not shuttling just yet.
Yeah, it's just pods.
We got to bring the captain here because he's not going to believe us if we tell him about this. Does they really think he's not going to believe him? Is he going to be like, you guys are joking around in this very tense and serious moment?
And you're joking around in this very specific way.
Is he really going to be like, all right, you guys go to the brig for joking around?
I don't think they tend to get up to mischief, these two.
Okay.
So they've made some mistakes in the past, and maybe he'll think that they're joshing. But speaking of Reed and Tucker, I like that they have this kind of slight friendship vibe. I mean, we'll recall that our first Clever Orbits episode was Shuttle Pod 1, and was the beginning of their friendship, from being totally averse to one another to now they not only tolerate, but they respect, and they have some sense of camaraderie and a little bit of playfulness between the two of them, just a slight bit. And we see them, I mean, Reed makes this little comment about like, oh, we've been spending too much time together, which, I mean, that's kind of one of those like fraternity style, like I'm going to punch you in the gut for fun kind of comments. I like to imagine that they really love and respect each other by this point. And so they actually talk about time travel and how does knowing the future alter your experience of the present. It's the closest this episode really got to philosophical disquisition.
That was a good conversation there.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think it would actually work in the way that Tucker thought that it would. Like, if you knew the future, that would alter the experience of the present in such a way that that knowledge of the future may quickly become invalid and useless.
Different theories.
So, butterfly effect, for example.
Butterfly, or it could be a closed time-like curve. That's when you know the future, but you can't do anything about it.
Which is, like, terrifying, right? There's, like, a Stephen King novel where somebody's, like, trying to fight the future, and the future's, like, fighting back. It's really good.
Fight back.
The future will kill you.
Future pushes back.
I think 12 Monkeys, the TV show, actually played with this, too. Yeah, I didn't really get to watch it, but have you seen that? Have you seen the show?
I haven't seen it, but I've seen the movie it was based on.
Yeah, so
which
the
is
movie
Elijah Tate. I think we watched that together like a million years ago.
Yeah, we did. We did. That was a really creepy, interesting short film, and then the movie was really good, and then the series was apparently one of the best of its decade. But what's that, Tyler?
Number. So that it's an interesting number of years you pulled out of a hat, Richard.
I don't remember the number.
We've been friends for a long time, Richard and I.
Oh, I'll bet you don't.
All the way back to the time of the Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus was an herbivore.
Speaking of the temporal radiation, I feel like I had a bit of a temporal radiation experience watching this episode and writing notes
stoned?
for Clever Orbits.
Were you
like I kind of felt like I had done this before.
Did we?
Funny.
Did we?
We did.
We've done it. I wasn't
we
able
did
to
this
find
in 2017. But maybe it's not. I've got notes on it. Maybe we never recorded, but I have notes on it from 2017.
I have notes on it somewhere too. I couldn't
different.
find them though. Yeah. Well, this just goes to show you we probably should spend the rest of our lives just reviewing the Star Trek canon over and over and over again.
That's right. In a loop, just like those 3 pictures of spaceships on Daniel's display. Maybe there's so few pictures because the future is really monotonous. Maybe at some point in the 26th century, it just started being the same thing over and over.
Ooh, that would be a really interesting. Well, I mean, we know up to like the 29th century, there's interesting, different stuff going on. But like maybe by the end of the 31st century, they've smoothed out all of the temporal Cold War so strongly, and they've, normalized the Federation so much that the Great Revolution is somebody starts a war within the Federation in order so that, you know how Kirk would go to a planet and he would notice, all right, well, they're no longer innovating. Like, they may not have war anymore. I think, I'm trying to remember what episode this was. Yeah, they just wanted to cause
some chaos, just so anything would happen. They were bored. It was like, there's nothing too static.
Well, it's not just boredom.
It's like the golden principled in Dune.
Principled, exactly. Yeah, like we've got to, in order to foster and facilitate growth and whatnot. And so some people had to be sacrificed or something. And then it's sort of like a taste of Armageddon from the original series, where we're having a war, but it's like a war with a weird purpose. And maybe Discovery shows up and saves everybody, stops the war, and says, "Hey, we don't need chaos. We don't need the shadows in order for innovation to happen."
That's right. That's right.
You don't need the Vorlons either. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever, I'm just going to let it bleed through, guys. I don't think I'd ever fully appreciated the Vorlon shadow philosophical debate until rewatching Into the Fire yesterday from season 4 of Babylon 5. Like, I saw, it was really clear to me. It was like, oh, you know what? They actually don't have these representatives of chaos and order. They're just doing what they're doing out of habit, and they've stopped questioning, which is ironic because they get everybody who's younger than them to question, who are you? What do you want? Who are you? What do you want? But they haven't answered those questions for themselves. And my moment of compassion for this podcast is actually the experience of the Kosh hologram speaking to Lorianne, and the shadow hologram right next to him. And I could feel tears in my eyes as I realized, oh, my God, Kosh. So by the way, people listening to this podcast, if you haven't watched Babylon 5, this is just me getting really jazzed about it in the middle of a Star Trek podcast. Yes, this is like a Trojan horse. You came for Star Trek. You're getting B5 for a couple minutes. Deal with it. So Kosh, you can hear the trepidation. You can hear the sadness. You can hear the loneliness and the desperation and the little hint of confusion in his voice. When he asks Lorianne, he says, will you go with us, or will we be alone as we leave the galaxy to the younger races? And I felt like, whoa. No matter how evolved a race gets, they're still going to have these very human style, we imagine, very human style concerns. And it was a way of dramatically and vitally and vibrantly humanizing Kosh that you don't get for the first several seasons. I mean, you kind of get it when he turns into Sheridan's father in order to tell him, hey, Sheridan, I'm about to die, which that was also heartrending. Like, hey, Sheridan, I'm sorry. And anyway, going back to future tense for a second. I've just been watching a lot of Babylon 5. So
great show, guys. I endorse it.
Great show. Yeah. Richard, do you have an endorsement as well?
Babylon 5?
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, it's a great dark horse of the 20th century. Like it's undervalued, but very underappreciated, I feel like. So anyway, okay. So how does knowing the future alter your experience of the present? Well, I mean, it makes the future boring, makes the future uninteresting, unexpected. Recently, I had an experience, and I'm going to share this with you guys, about the nature of living life, and what's the point of living life? How does it work, and how is it supposed to work? So our brains are powerful prediction mechanisms and machines. We're built for survival and not necessarily to thrive. We're built to account for oncoming threats and the possibility of things happening that might kill us. And I've always had a suspicion that this is not the way to like deal with life, from a past-based set of concerns and fears and stories. So what I distinguished was, and I'm just going to read this little article and to inject some even deeper philosophy into this episode. Quote, and I wrote this last week, your unique purpose, mission, and gift here is simply to surrender and to be present. In that surrender to intuition, your highest flow, what feels best and has been shown you by spirit, of course, leaning heavily into a metaphysics that some of our listeners might not be aware of yet, in that surrender, you will discover what you're meant to do. In that being present, you will be open to shifts in what you're surrendering to and discovering yourself ever more and anew. It's dynamic and like a sport where you're responding uniquely to whatever shows up in front of you from the fullest expression of who you are and the glory of full, free creativity. So imagine you see a lighthouse. God says, run towards that lighthouse as fast as you can. That's your purpose. So you start running towards that lighthouse, and you reach a certain point along the path to that lighthouse, and suddenly you hear God's voice again. And then you question, you're like, is that God? Or is it my ego? Didn't God very clearly just tell me to go to the lighthouse? And this voice is speaking very softly, and again, God says, now go this way instead. And you feel led to a very different direction. So because you were fully in the present, you could hear the shift clearly. So you follow, and as you run in the new direction, things that way are even more fulfilling, enlivening, exciting, bright, and beautiful. To quote Aleister Crowley, the joy of life consists in the exercise of one's energies, continual growth, constant change, the enjoyment of every new experience. To stop means simply to die. The eternal mistake of mankind is to set up an attainable ideal. To quote Jonathan England, the path is the goal. This is the only answer I've found to the question of life that keeps every second vibrant and full, vital and alive, and every second coming both pregnant with mystery and ready to be eagerly embraced as something radically new. So this is my view on the future, is that we're not meant to know it. It's more interesting when we don't know it, and it'd be really boring if we were able to predict it or know it. So what do you guys think about my little digression there?
It's very Taoist.
Well, thank you. So yeah,
be like water.
Be like water. Yeah, exactly.
He is water, my friend. Yeah, the interesting thing is, no, I think what you're describing is probably correct from a neurological point of view, because when you surrender to being present in the moment and you're not relying on your, mostly planning-based, higher-order reasoning, whatever skills, you're tapping into a more evolved part of yourself. That part of us that reviews the past and makes rational plans and stuff, that's pretty recently evolved, and it's not as optimized as the old stuff, which is about how do you handle the current moment. That's what it's like for the animals, I would guess. They're just always like that. That thing has evolved for 1 billion years. The part of you that is, the voice of your ego that tells you to be careful in social situations or whatever, that's 100,000 years old or something. It's not 1 billion years old. So you're tapping into a very powerful stream when you do as you're describing.
Yeah, one of my visions recently has been, what if there was a version of Starfleet that incorporated emotional intelligence, fitness, alchemy, superconscious mind, all of these things that I've learned. Like we see in the vision of the
Federation
is
pretty rationalist.
Yeah, and it's like paramilitary.
My religion is science.
I mean, yeah, that's what does that even mean? I still don't know what that means.
I don't think it's going to last you into the 31st century. I think to get to the 31st century, it needs to tap into some deeper parts of human psychology. Maybe we'll see that, but I kind of don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think they made an attempt with Discovery to at least acknowledge emotion and the importance of it, and like intuition, though, the deeper level of your emotions being your guidance system. That I think is a stone's throw past where Star Trek is willing to currently go, though it still stands for great stuff. Speaking of great stuff, so there was a lot of great stuff in this episode. I've said the phrase great stuff too many times. The music is tense from the very beginning. I really appreciated it. The camera work, underscoring the creepiness of the temporal radiation consequences, is well done when the camera comes all the way back out. Something about that was just really effective. The Tholians. I love that the Tholians show up, and they've got 22nd century ships, and they also have this weird language that I really liked. I was curious who they were being controlled by and whether or not they were actually on a good side, and it made it seem like the temporal Cold War is really just this free-for-all. Like, you've got the Sulivan, you've got Daniels, who's nowhere to be found here, except maybe this ship is clearly from his faction, and then you've got the Tholians. So it's like, it's even more confronting than Cold Front was. And there's a moment where Archer realizes he's basically in too deep, like he may be about to die when they find the Tolkir destroyed, the Vulcan ship. And I just love that. Like, he doesn't betray any of it on his face, but you can kind of see behind his visage that there's stuff churning in his stomach and in his system. Like, well, crap. And that, I mean, the temporal Cold War is basically a exercise in how much can we disturb Archer? Like how much dread can we fill this one character who represents the crew with? And I think they're very effective at it. They're very it's a great representation. I mean, like, and you couldn't really have this on Voyager or Deep Space Nine or Next Generation, because the people on those series basically have a sense, or even the original series. Like, the original series, they started to have a certain level of confidence in their knowledge of what's going on in the universe. And in Next Gen, it just deepens and gets more grounded. And, I mean, they still have weird moments for sure, but nothing this messed up. And so the depth of messed upness that this reaches, it takes on a greater, it's a weird way to express it, but it reaches a greater impact by having it impact people who are between us and the original series, by people who are in the 22nd century. So, like, it's a contrast. It's a measure of contrast. Because I feel like if we had data, like examining status reports or whatever, to try to understand and find a pattern like he did in Conspiracy around the temporal Cold War, they'd have a lot of confidence, or a lot more confidence. But this is like the Wild West. And on the Wild West, or in the Wild West, an accusation of time travel, even if it's not true, we later learn that it is, of course. But at this stage in the game, they can't be certain. They just have people throwing around this phrase and having advanced technology. So I like that T'Pol stays as skeptical as she does for as long as she does, because that's legitimate. But all these humans are just like, they are scared shitless, because who knows? Is there a temporal Cold War? We've never been this far out in space. Maybe there is one. Maybe we're all fucked. I mean, like, so anyway, that was what I liked about this episode. That was what I really appreciated. What about you guys? What did you think?
I loved the atmosphere and the tension. And the fact that the folded space was cool and the temporal radiation was cool. I think the sci-fi concepts were, substituting in for the philosophy concepts here, and I'm fine with that because they were pretty good.
Yeah, there were a couple other things that I wanted to talk about. The Reed shooting things. In the beginning, he's as eager as he always is to shoot something. With your permission, sir. And then I mean, it's totally reasonable here. It wasn't just shooting for shooting's sake, which is fine, whatever. And then, so we don't know who the Tholians are being controlled by. Did you guys see that the doors to 10 forward were behind the launch bay? Like, there's one scene. Yeah, it's the doors to 10 forward, and then to the Voyager's, like, cafeteria or whatever they called it. The mess hall. That's what it was called. Like, the Neelix restaurant. The thinly veiled and barely disguised Neelix restaurant with replicators. He never named it. He should have named it. But anyway, I think they, like, forgot. The production team forgot to put the doors in the proper place or something. I don't know how that works. But so I noticed that, and I was a little bit disappointed. But maybe this is the origin of those doors, and they get used for the rest of Star Trek history. Yeah. Maybe there's a little lounge on the Enterprise that we never see because it's hidden behind the doors. And then, okay, so to Paul, Vulcans don't lie, but then the Vulcans from this century do lie, and they're renowned for maybe bending the truth. We see later on as they develop. So I was a little bit disturbed for a second when I saw her lying to the Tholians. Like, yes, our launch bay doors have been damaged, and you could see she was kind of stumbling for something to say in order to say not destroy Enterprise. So she was motivated. I understand, and I appreciate it. But, like, there's a long-standing tradition of Vulcans not lying and being sort of like, well, okay, so the Minbari, they never tell the whole truth, right? That's their thing. But sorry, this is not Babylon 5. This is not Babylon 5.
Streams again.
Crossing the stream.
Just keep leaving.
So the last question I really have about this, and then unless you guys have more, we can go to ratings, is, Richard, what did you think of the Tholian language?
Oh, I only managed to decode about 50% of it.
What does that mean?
I was only able to figure out about what 50% of it meant based on the just listening to it.
What did you figure out? I expected
the translations were basically accurate. They were a little missing some of the nuance. It's a shame we don't get more non-humanoids. With non-humanoid languages.
Later on, you see the Tholians, and they are damn.
Yeah, they're quite
ugly.
Polygonal.
They are terrifying in a really interesting way, and I like how it's a development from the original series where they're just this like kind of. They look like a casket in their shape, like a diamond casket with eyes and multicolors. And they have very high voices. You will get out of our system. And here their voices are so high that it's just a series of pops and whistles. So clearly the translator adapts and gets better over time. Yeah. So anyway, that's I guess a decent answer. I liked it. I'll give it a 9 out of 10, flat 9. It wasn't the best episode, but it was decent, it was entertaining. Yeah. What did you guys think?
Right. That's accurate. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I might go higher. I might go to 9.5.
Tyler, you're up.
I'm actually down, but I give it 4 out of 5 furrowed bacula brows.
Good.
Because he had some future tension in his head.
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
I've got some tension in my bowels.
That was a very, it was both necessary and it was a very red letter media.
Both necessary
kind of
and sufficient.
And it was a condition.
Necessary, yeah. Or a movement.
That's right. Doing some forward movement.
in E minor.
Well, gentlemen, it is with heavy heart that I bid Clever Orbits adieu for a time as I leave the Enterprise to go fight in the Klingon Civil War. I want to thank you guys for assembling in the hallways. I'm going to walk all the way to the transporter room.
I'll hit you with pain
armor.
sticks.
No, there weren't paint sticks
Get ready.
in that scene.
All right, here we go. Richard, you got yours? All right. I've got mine. Come here, Captain.
I got mine. Oh, yeah.
Oh, right in the paint. Ouch.
Well, there it is.
There it was.
Do you have SIPA? We're hitting you pretty hard.
This has been Clever Orbits. I'm immune to pain. I have that neurological illness where you can't feel pain.
SIPA, yeah.
SIPA.
SIPA.
So this is an important, I think, addendum. Is it ethical to send someone's corpse into the past in order to do a temporal ethics test on a group of humans?
Yes.
Go.
No.
Deathmatch.
I'd like to change my answer.
What?
There's nothing more immoral. To defile a corpse, think about the person's family. Think about how the person's family is going to feel. You're going to cause them unnecessary pain as they think about how the body of their child or their father or whatever and went through this humiliating experience. And it's an abomination.
What if their parents were the ones who suggested it?
Well, then that's fucked up. That might be a professional ethicist.
A lot about the ethics of the future because we're not there. What could happen to standard morality in the time that it takes for us to get 1,000 years into the future? How could it warp? Our standards may be different from theirs.
Our standards are absolute and correct.
All right, well, I think we've got a unified front. We should, in fact, not experiment with corpses in proving the legitimacy of the temporal ethics of people from the past.